Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, so just going to work this like this. So the technology isn't working already, so that's a great start. On my behalf, one second. All right, we'll do it the old school way and just push buttons, and you probably should. A little bit about me, as Carolyn said, I'm a senior consultant with MT&L. Been with MT&L for just over 6 years, or no, sorry, just under 6 years. My BA from St. FX is in kinesiology, so I spent a lot of time around sport growing up. I was one of the leads for the intramural program at St. FX. And after St. FX, I had to decide what I wanted to do to get a job, and it was either sport management or PR, something like the two things. And I picked PR, so I have a good knowledge and background in sport management and understand a bit of what you guys deal with on a daily basis, just from my studies. So my main focus is around media relations, issues management, work with clients, get them out of the news, to help them get in the news. If it's promoting a new product on the retail front, so if it's automotive with Ford of Canada, if it's a new cell product with Rogers, or if it's helping a company increase their share value by promoting them and what they do. Our company is called MT&L Public Relations, and I'm glad to have Jen McMillan here with me today. Jan's one of the principals. We are you could call us a full-service PR firm. Do everything from media relations to advertising, social media, digital. My colleague Kevin was in a couple weeks ago to talk about the digital media and social media and the exciting things that are happening in that front. We offer, as I said, a full range of services, everything from branding, communications, employee engagement, the whole gamut. With our partner National Public Relations, National is the largest PR firm in Canada, with offices all across Canada. So we've got a good network to rely on. If we have a client here who wants to get work done outside of the region, or if they have a client they want to get work done within Atlantic Canada, we've got those connections. So we're very fortunate to have that. So to get started on things, sort of the game plan for the day today is to talk a little bit about why we communicate, what's the reasons behind it, the changing media landscape. So this will touch on, if some of you were in Kevin's presentation, it'll kind of flow into that a little bit and talk about how media is becoming a lot more online and digital. And then we'll get into media relations and how to be prepared, how to pitch a story, and some tips for dealing with the media and being prepared. At any time, feel free to ask me a question, or you can wait till the end. But it's good to have a bit of a discussion as we go along. I know a lot of you maybe are in different positions. Some of you may have more resources than others when it comes to communications. So if it's specific to you and your organization, feel free to ask away, and hopefully Jen and I and Carolyn can help you out and give you a good answer. So I'm going to ask you guys, why do we communicate? Simple question. Share information. Tell a story. I like both of those. Sharing a story is one that really resonates with us. It's all about storytelling. Everything we do in communications really comes back to storytelling. By communicating, we can build relationships. We could inform someone of a new rule or regulation that's coming into play. We can inspire someone to participate in the sport that we're administrating. We can promote our goals. So what is the goal of the organization this year? We can persuade someone, move people from thinking one way to thinking another way. And again, it comes back to the storytelling and about people. This is a great photo off Flickr, I think, and it just captures really someone who's passionate about telling a story. Communication fundamentally is about human connection. It comes back to telling stories that our forefathers have told, sitting around a campfire and talking to each other and telling them about what happened the day before. passing legends and tales on from generation to generation. That's what it really comes down to, those human connections. So is it about score of the game at the end of the day? Sometimes yes, but you can dig deeper into all that and it comes back to the human connection that's at play there. What has evolved over time is, and it continues to evolve, is how we communicate and tell those stories. So instead of sitting around a campfire, today we're able to, before we even get out of bed, pick up our phone and turn it on and click on an app that brings up the latest news from the day. So there's just the way that we tell the story has been evolving in some of the language that we use. In today's society, really everyone is the media, or they think they're the media sometimes. Good example, Dave Carroll. If you were to Google search United Airlines, one of the top things that would come back would be Dave Carroll in his song United Breaks Guitars. Dave Carroll had an incident like many of us had where our luggage may have gotten lost, but of course his is a broken guitar. And fundamentally it came back to how can he get his message out there? How does he tell his story? How does he communicate? Dave Carroll is more talented than I do, and he's a songwriter and a guitar player, and he do what he does naturally. He's able to communicate that way. And with today's society and today's digital environment, it goes online, and it spreads and it spreads and gets the message out there. Dave Carroll, in this instance, is the media. I heard a great line this morning on the radio. They were talking about the Liberal convention that happened on the weekend. And Don Tapscott is a very influential business and technology reporter. And he said it's no longer me to we communicating, it's we to we. That's what digital media has done. We all are now in on the story and we're all pushing that story out. So yes, it's important for someone to get it started, but with online digital media, it gets more followers on board. So instead of just you as the sole person in your organization, you have all of your followers who are now pushing your message as well. So it's digital media has definitely changed the way we operate. Issues develop faster. Janet and I were talking this morning. There was a cruise line that hit a rock in Italy on the weekend. There's now a tracking online of where the path that cruise ship took. We've got instances. I work with an airline, and we're always looking at what's risk management and what do we have to look out for. When the plane went down in the Hudson River, there was a guy who was on the plane who was tweeting while he was still in the water on the plane, saying, "Holy shit, I've just been in a plane crash. We're in the middle of the Hudson River." So it's no longer us waiting around till the next day and waiting for the news to come out the next morning to find out what's happening. It's instantaneous. It's 24/7. Now there are a lot of risks involved with that. It creates more noise. So what do you trust? Where does the credibility come into play? Obviously, there's an opportunity to reach more people. There's more sources for traditional media, so they know who to go to. So this guy who was tweeting that he was in a plane crash, the media can now connect with him online and help them tell a story of this real life person and what he went through. Another risk, proliferation of experts. Who can you trust? I could go online tomorrow and create a profile that I'm an expert on gymnastics. I've never participated in gymnastics to a competitive level before, but I could go on and create that and probably wing it for a little bit and get away with it, and I may become an expert in the area. So there's some risk involved with that, and it's important to establish yourself if you are going to go there to do it properly and to make sure that you're communicating what should be communicated. It creates an opportunity for advocacy groups. So if you're trying to get someone to persuade them to change their opinion, there's a lot more opportunity to get out there. And especially among younger generations, there's an expectation that you will be online, that you will be digital. That if they want the information, it's accessible. They don't have to go to the newspaper to find it. It's there. It's online. There's apps for that. They know where to go. Now, traditional media understands this. They're not going to sit by and let things dwindle and go out of business completely. Yes, there have been drastic cuts and there have been downturns in the industry. There have been papers that have closed. But they've done what they had to do to connect. This is the Chronicle Herald. They've created an app for your iPad and an app for your iPhone, an app for your BlackBerry So if you want the information, you simply go to your app and it comes up. Your information is instantaneous and it's updated instantaneously. They've also, the outlets have gone online, to Twitter, to social media. So they're developing relationships with people directly. So again, looking for their experts. So if an incident happens somewhere, say it's at the local hockey rink, say it's at a horse competition, if it's wherever it is, if someone's there and has access to social media, they will get your story out before you can think about it. Really, your story's out there. Traditionally, you could contain your story for a period of time, get yourself more prepared, and then get out with your story. But with today's environment, it's instantaneous. And again, it's not just the outlets that are online, it's the personalities. Jay Onrait, TSN, everybody tunes into TSN. Some people just tune in to see what Jay's going to do. But he's online, he's making connections with people. His Twitter feed here isn't him promoting what's going to be on SportsCenter tonight. It's about him making connections with people who are out there and developing those relationships. So even though things have moved a little bit and we're more connected and online digitally, the traditional things still matter. So developing relationships, ensuring you have your messages down pat, all of the traditional staples still count. You have to have a foundation before you can go off and go into the social media forums, engage with media, but it all comes back to the same thing. As I said, the traditional landscape has changed slightly. There might be a few less people here and there, but when it comes down to it, we still have the same local coverage, provincial, regional, national, on different levels. So when you're thinking of where your organizations are in your sport, the top levels I think that would be influential for you would be the local level and the provincial level. Now you may have national sport organizations that speak to the broader vision of where you're going as an organization, but for you and the members in your organizations and associations who help implement things on the ground, it's more the local and provincial level. So getting into the communities where, for instance, Metro in Halifax. Well, Metro in Halifax focuses on Halifax. So what's happening in Halifax? I can't go to Metro in Halifax and pitch them a story on what is happening for my client in Cape Breton, because it doesn't matter. It comes back to who their audience is. You have to fundamentally come back to who their audience is and what are they going to communicate. Again, TSN is a national program. It'd be rare for TSN to come here and to cover a minor hockey tournament happening somewhere. Why? Now there is instance they would.
Michael Rumsby, yes, that wasn't TSN. That was Dan and Jay on Sports.
Yeah.
Yeah. They came, but that was a story. That was an individual story.
That's exactly it. So I'm going to touch on that and what makes those stories. Now the thing to remember, I guess one difference between some social media and traditional media, with social media, there's no filter. You can communicate something and you can say whatever you want, which is scary at times. There's no one validating it's true. With traditional media, an important thing to remember here is you're delivering a specific message to a journalist who's then going to filter it back to their audience. So they're not going to take everything you say just as you say it. They're going to do their homework, they're going to look around, they're going to get some understanding, talk to some other people, and then they'll deliver your message to your audience. So a key thing to remember here is that your audience isn't the journalist. Your audience really are your members you're trying to communicate with, if it's the broader public. The journalist is just your filter to get the information out. So I think that's the easiest way to think of it. It comes down to credibility factor. You're with online. There's a lack of trust in some people. But for instance, I'll ask you guys: where do you go to get your news?
MSN.com. It's my homepage.
So it's online, but it is still, they have the traditional media functions of They've got standards to follow. They go out, they find a story, they filter it out to the audience.
There was a fire in Dartmouth over Christmas. Wanted information on it. The only place there was any information on it was YouTube.
Exactly. You're going online.
Local coverage, yeah.
I was looking at some stats, and for some reason, I think we should do sort of a commission of research on this. I'll plant this seed in front of everybody to Janet now. Where do people go for the news? So there was a website for the Canadian Commission on Media Relations, I think it's called, or Media Research. And it was showing that between, it's hard to get timely research on it, but between 2004 and 2007, people who were going to get to the news, who thought newspapers were important, that had declined by 15%. People who thought going and watching the newscast that evening was down 13%. But people who thought their main source and what was the important piece to get the information were going online. So online is obviously, I don't think that's a surprise to anyone, is increasing. But it's just how the traditional media are picking up speed and getting connected. Now, before I proceed on the media relations front, it's important to remember that media relations is only one slice of the pie. Media relations is just one part of your communications, your plethora of options you have. So is it always the best option to do media relations? The short answer is no. Can it be vital? Can it be key to you being successful? Yes. With media relations, there's a lot of risk involved. And like any decision you make, it's kind of a risk assessment. And on a daily basis, we get calls from clients, we provide counsel saying, if maybe somebody else did a story and it's a negative story about them, well, we don't necessarily say, let's counteract that and do a story that's going to get back at that person for what they said. You've got to weigh your balances, and it all comes back to your strategy. So, with limited resources, it can be challenging sometimes to think of the communications function. But when you set out the first of the year and think your goals, what are your goals for your organization this year? Is it that we want to increase membership? We want to increase the number of participants in the sport? We want to communicate that it really isn't that expensive to play our sport, or it's easy, it's accessible. So if you've got those goals, whatever they are, how can communications tie into your strategy? And if you're trying to communicate something that doesn't tie into your strategy, then sometimes you can say, well, what's the point of communicating it? Why is the point of going out to the media and getting a story on something without tying it back to your overall corporate strategy? Now, going back to the whole connected thing, today's journalists, they wear multiple hats. They, with the reductions in resources, today's journalists have a generalist role. So we no longer have as many beat reporters. So we do some healthcare work, for instance. You're trying to pitch something to a health reporter in Atlantic Canada. Good luck finding a health reporter in Atlantic Canada. Now there are one or two who used to be the health reporter, and we know who they are, so we can still connect them because it's their interest. But a lot of times they're general reporters. Now sport, yes, there are sport reporters out there, but I would challenge you and say that your main target audience to communicate your organization's messages may not be a sport reporter. Sometimes there will be. Sometimes if you're trying to get a story on there's a tournament happening and it has a major impact on a community. I grew up playing hockey, soccer, sailing, basketball, any sport that was around. I grew up in a small town. So if we had a tournament in a small town, obviously the local paper is going to cover it because it has an importance to that town. But if you're in a city such as Halifax, you're trying to get coverage on a smaller hockey tournament or a gymnastics tournament or any kind of a tournament, it can be more challenging. So how do you get those stories? And we're going to talk about those in a second. But for instance, Jean Laroche. Jean Laroche is a well-respected CBC reporter. You can see here he's giving updates on there's a stalled truck on the McDonald Bridge, metal thieves out of luck. But what was his tweet from yesterday? Jean Laroche was at a swim meet at Caden University. Go Dartmouth Crusaders. Now, I just picked a random journalists, when I went looking for this, and this came up, and I was like, what a perfect example. So you now know that John LaRoche has an interest in swimming. So I'm assuming he has a child who probably participates. So there's a relationship opportunity. Go out there and search and look and find out what media you're interested in. It's developing those relationships which are vital to getting your story out there. Now the risk of being online, like I said, is that there's more information swirling out there and there's more connections for them to have. So they're now getting pitched on a media story online, through email, through phone, and they're getting different information coming from different ways. So you have to make sure that your story is on track. And again, 24/7 deadlines. I pick up my phone now. The information that I went on the Chronicle Herald website this morning may be different than what's on there now. Because news has happened. News is occurring at every moment of the day. News is occurring, and they got to update their information to make sure it's relevant. So how do you get in there? How do you cut through the noise? Well, the key thing is to think like a journalist, to make their job easier for them so they can succeed. And so you can succeed and get your story out there in a headline. What makes a story, I always think of what's newsworthy. Well, it's something that's timely, if there's change, conflict or drama, victory, defeat. Tim Tebow, right now, maybe not after this past weekend, but he was, one of the top sport figures in the world. So, now as Carolyn, just to give an example here, that she received a pitch for an article on, it was about Tim Tebow, but it really wasn't about Tim Tebow. So I'm going to let her just explain a little bit.
It was somebody sent me an email. Because we do Sport Quarterly, I get emails from journalists all the time pitching, not journalists, PR people pitching stories thinking that I'm a member of the media. And so I got one the other day, and it was, the headline was all about Tim Tebow and, how he's a very divisive character in sport. And so it hooked me right in because my husband talks about it nonstop. So I was like, oh, what's this about? And anyway, it went on to say about, what divides the population on Tim Tebow? What is it about him? And ultimately, it comes down to religion. And, one could argue that it's actually Christians fighting Christians. And, for more on that. And ultimately, when you keep reading a couple paragraphs down, this was a PR person that was pitching some guy's book on Christianity. But they used Tim Tebow as the headline, the subject matter, and I was really intrigued in reading along, and I thought it was really brilliant to find that kind of personal story to pitch it in some stupid book.
So you can see, those connections. So the time you go through this list, and a lot of them would apply here. It's timely. Tim Tebow is one of the hottest athletes in the world. I don't mean by appearance. I'm just saying he's popular. There's conflict. Religion, sport, victory, defeat. Is Tebow going to win? Obviously he didn't, but there's that whole thing, and tying it in it's a human interest in a way. Surprising, it's obviously who would link Tim Tebow? Tim Tebow is linked to Christianity, but how do you, when you're making those connections, the common person would think about sport. They wouldn't go there. Another example, and some of you may have seen this video, and I'm not going to show the video because it's like a half-hour thing or 15 minutes, but anybody here watch ESPN E60? I'd encourage all of you to go on and watch ESPN E60 because I think it would really help a lot of you look at what your media relations in a different way. ESPN E60 is a program about human stories related to sport, really is what it comes down to. It's the human element. It's about people. Again, it ties back to storytelling. It's about people. So why are Connor and Caden newsworthy? Well, Connor's 8 years old, participates in triathlons, and Caden's 6. He participates in triathlons. I'm just going to give you sort of the high-level information. So what's interesting about that? I will say it's interesting because I have a 9-month-old son, and after watching this, I did go to the Triathlon Nova Scotia site and learn that kids do kid triathlons here. It was interesting. So if anyone here's a triathlon, Hey, I thought it was very interesting, and so since I can't probably do it, I'll put my son in it when he gets old enough. So to get back to this, so there isn't really much of a story that kids participate in triathlons. What the story is here is that Caden has cerebral palsy. Connor, who's an amazing kid, who I was choked up watching this video, is saying, I want to participate in a sport where my brother can participate with me. I play football, I play soccer, but my brother can't participate. But he can participate in a triathlon with me because I can help him participate. So it's that human element, it's that emotion, it's that hook. We always say to some clients sometimes when you're out fundraising or something, what is the hook? What is that emotional? What tugs at your emotion strings? This is a human element story here. I'll give you another example, a personal example. I organized and played in 2 hockey games over the holidays. Now I didn't pitch this because it was over the holidays and I wasn't thinking work mode. I was busy, but there's potential here in future years. So we organized this hockey game. A bunch of washed up bums used to play hockey together growing up. We played AAA hockey growing up. We were pretty good. Now we're lazy and no one would want to come watch us. But we made a bit more of a story out of it. We said, let's make it a fundraiser. Let's have all everyone pays. We'll pay for the ice time, pay for the beer afterward, and then we'll create a dance. We'll have a dance afterward. So we started thinking and developing ideas. So if I would have went to the media and said, a bunch of washed up bums from North Sydney are going to play hockey, you should come watch us. They're not going to come out and they're going to, that's great, guys. But there's other stories out there that have a personal connection. So what we did is, like I said, we created a fundraiser. We've raised over $3,000 off 2 hockey games because we pitched it. We got out to people and said, you should come to this. We're going to give out scholarships. So we created these 2 scholarships and we put them in, it was actually scholarships in memory of my brother. And we're going to give out to high school athletes now 2 $1,000 scholarships to the high school I graduated from. There's a human connection there. We had people coming to the game who were like, we had a cash thing at the door just dumping money into this bucket we had to come watch us play hockey. But they weren't there to watch us play hockey. They were there because there was a human connection. They knew my family, they knew people who were going. It was a good opportunity to relate to people. They could come afterward, we had a dance, they were able to tell stories and connect with each other. So there was that human element. It goes back to the fundamentals of communication and storytelling. So, I know for a fact that if I call it, so we missed our opportunity there. In June, when graduation happens, I'm pretty confident I could call someone now and say, these are the 2 students who got these scholarships. And here's the story behind how they got the scholarships. Here's the story of my brother. So it brings it all back to a human connection. And Carol and I were talking last week and we said, well, why would the media, random instance, cover a bodybuilding competition? Well, there's so much more they could cover in a way. But if you think about it, maybe there's a story there of somebody who lost a lot of weight, and now they're like the most fit person in the province. So it's that those stories are creating human connections. And it's timely because there is a tournament, so there is a bit of a hook, but you create that human connection. Pick on Janet here and get her to maybe tell a bit about the Blue Nose Marathon. MT&L started as the communications of the Blue Nose Marathon, and it was all about telling the human story.
Yeah, in fact, we very deliberately positioned it as the people's marathon, so it wasn't about elite athleticism, even though that's important. But when people signed up to register, we asked them to tell their story, like, why are you running? And we got the most amazing stories, and the journalists loved to know the stories. There was a woman that was running. She wanted to come back to Halifax because she had had her first kiss in high school in St. Hill, and she wanted to run around the hill. And there was a couple that was getting married that weekend, and they actually built this into their entire wedding. They ran together in a marathon. They happen to be related to Sean, as it turns out. And there was somebody who was running, who had beat against all odds a form of cancer, and so was running as part of her health practice. So that's stuff the journalists loved.
Yeah, so and I know, some of the examples we gave maybe are the Nose Marathon. You think, well, it's a big engine. They've got a lot of resources. But really, any of you could do that with your organization. It's going at the right level. If there's a story, we're trying to show that our sport is accessible, or we want to increase membership. So you don't just say, everyone's going to say, well, you can play my sport and you're going to get healthy and you're going to get fit, you're going to have fun, and you're going to build camaraderie and teamwork. But if you can relate it to a human story and human connection, it brings out a little bit more, and it brings it out to a level that maybe the other person isn't thinking about. So maybe it's not necessarily going to be on the sport page, but does it have to be on the sport page? So just the way you think about things, think a little differently. Bit more now on sort of some tips on how to be successful, I guess. 90% preparation, 10% inspiration. We stress and stress and stress with our clients that you've got to be prepared. How does it relate back to your strategy? And then if you're going to go ahead with it, you've got to be prepared. Think about what's been written, said, broadcast. So what have journalists been reporting on in the past? Be a news junkie. Google Alerts. How many people have Google Alerts set up right now? So a couple. But it's free. You go on to Google Alerts and you put in a keyword, and it gives you the information on a certain topic. You can put parameters around it, but it keeps you informed on what's happening on a topic that's interest of you. Follow reporters on social media, RSS feeds. So if there's a blog that has latest information, ask a friend.